Sagabo, Osio, Aquini, good day, buenos dias. Tureygua Taino Kai, introducing concepts from the book Science Symbols, Motifs and Totems. And today, we're going to go into Cosmic Systems of Balance and Viability, explain viable knowledge, and introduce these concepts. So what is viable knowledge? The practices that have been in place ancestrally are based on a concept called viable knowledge. This knowledge is the proper orientation to the Earth's magnetic pulse vibration based on geographic and electromagnetic factors that influence survival in a particular eco-landmass system environment. In order to explain this better, we should explain viable knowledge as a concept. So, viable knowledge, as it relates to bloodline, phenotype, and indigenousness, is knowledge about the inheritance to land by birth and education about one's environment and resources for the production of sustainable living systems that maintain, support, and protect the perpetual existence of human and environmental life. So we should understand viable knowledge and compare that to our beliefs. A belief is a concept, attitude, or perception of information used when there is not enough information to hold on to. When there's not information enough to anchor the perception of reality with confidence or security of outcome, you form a belief. Knowledge is fact that be confirmed through logical deduction of cause and effect. Knowledge creates security and confidence. Where there is security, there is no fear to take action. Knowledge dissolves fear. So, understanding this viable knowledge concept, knowledge versus beliefs, we can go back and reflect on the knowledge of our ancestors to understand how these concepts merge. We can verify and research today facts pertaining to how our American ancestors lived, survived, and thrived and reproduced on this land through documentation and research and study of their ways of life. Through these studies, one can see that our ancestors embraced balanced or green lifestyles. Our ancestors created sustainable living systems and developed the land that they inhabited in non-invasive, non-destructive ways. This is something called traditional ecological knowledge, and this is provided by the National Park Service. Traditional ecological knowledge is an ongoing accumulation of knowledge, practice, and belief about relationships between living beings in specific ecosystems that is acquired by indigenous people over hundreds or thousands of years through direct contact with the environment, handed down through generations. So this is the knowledge of our ancestors. Part of that knowledge is understanding a calendar. And our ancestors operate on a 13 moon calendar, which is a base 13 system. We know they knew of divine frequency, which we're going to go into. They followed cosmic calendars, and this allowed them to live harmoniously in their environment utilizing planting. Their study of mathematical patterns and ratios created utilizing mathematics led to their understanding of nature, order, and the golden ratio. Now, this is a very specific nature, order, the golden ratio, Fibonacci sequence. These are all reflections of the same rule. An example is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and each term in this sequence is simply the sum of the preceding term. The quotient of these terms is 1.618, or the inverse 0.618. This proportion is known by many names such as the golden ratio, pi, the golden mean, Fibonacci sequence, and divine proportion. So there's a lot of ways to understand this in seed spirals, in plants of aloe vera, in seashells, in a ram's horn. But it's just understood that these ratios exist in nature and that our ancestors knew of them. And this is part of their understanding of the mathematics of their viable knowledge and their understanding of divine patterns. These ratios are known to exist everywhere found in nature, and the proportions to which nature manifests. These ratios can be found in proportions between limbs and height in the human body. They can be found in the proportions and movement of the bee's wings, and the curvature of the ram's horns, or in the innate structure and spiraling growth of a plant of aloe vera. These proportions, ratios, and measurements are the building blocks that form the algorithm of life on this material plane on Earth. So our ancestors documented this in many glyphs that represented the conch, and you can delve more into this through my presentation, The Cosmic Systems of Balance and Viability, which can be scanned and appears on page 37 in the book, but can actually be scanned from your screen. So, to delve a little bit more into our viable systems and our understanding of viable knowledge, we have to explore the viable system model. So this is a model of organizational structure of any autonomous system capable of reproducing itself. A viable system is any system organized in such a way as to meet the demands of a changing environment and reproduce perpetually. And this comes from a viable system model for designing more responsive organizations. Today, our communities have, for the most part, abandoned our traditional ways, beliefs, and concepts in exchange for the consumer lifestyle and benefits of modern society's infrastructure, energy, and consumer fulfillment systems. In general, all people living in the modern world have turned to unsustainable living systems. These ways exploit and destroy our bodies and living environments. These systems do not support perpetual existence. These systems are destructive to the individual, family, and environment, which lead to the dissolution of the family, tribe, band, and clan, which destroy our nations and ensure that our survival on planet Earth cannot be viable or sustainable. To pursue our viability and sustainability, we must correct our physical and ontological orientation to the planet's living systems within its particular environments. The performance of this shift involves reverting to original green lifestyle of our ancestors, and still we must dissolve our fear and reinform ourselves as to the context and proper understanding of reality, our objective and subjective realities, and absolute truth and absolute realities. We must approach this reset challenge by first redefining the context through which we are viewing the world, truth, and reality. We can observe that on the planet, particular environments produce particular flora and fauna. As people living and surviving and thriving in these particular environments have particular lifestyles and cultures and practices that ensure their survival in their particular environments. In these varied environments all over the earth, inhabitants particular to those environments live and have observable practices and physical features that allow their ancestors to live, survive, and thrive in these particular environments. Those practices and repeated actions lead to development of cultures, ways of being, and observable physical traits that are carried through the bloodline through time today. We should define and elaborate on bloodline and phenotype and genotype. So our bloodline is that from which you came, heritage, lineage, and environment. Your phenotype is the observable traits in physical composition of a body. Epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. So the purpose of this viable knowledge, understanding how all this works to create a living system. Bloodline and viable knowledge as it relates to bloodline, phenotype, and genotype, and indigeneity is knowledge about the inheritance to land by birth education, about one's environment and resources for the production of sustainable living systems that maintain, support, and protect the perpetual existence of human and environmental life. So our ancestors' mother cultures produced viable knowledge that led to development of staple crops that allow us to thrive, produce energy, and live in balance within our environments. These culture systems produced and cultivated crops such as maize, manioc, beans, wheat, and squash. The production of the staples allowed value to be produced and exchanged in our environments with others, leading to trade from agriculture. And agriculture produces societies. We can understand that if we trace the origin of staple crops, they can lead to us understanding how society formed. And this is part of this viable knowledge. Aboriginal American cultures originated the staples of civilization through agricultural development. The development and production of corn, maize, and tubers like manioc sustained indigenous American tribes from the Amazon basin to the shores of Nova Scotia. Over time, this developed into the systemic planting of certain complementary produce like the three sisters of the indigenous North American agriculture, namely corn, beans, and squash, in an intercropping process. So to elaborate on this, corn, beans, and squash were planted together in an array which complemented the growth and sharing of nutrients, physical support, and moisture containment through the plant's root systems. The benefit and result was a sharing of nitrogen that enabled the best growth for each crop. Corn provided support for beans. Beans provided nitrogen through nitrogen-fixing rhizobia bacteria that live on roots, and squash and pumpkins provided ground cover to suppress the growth of weeds and inhibit evaporation from the soil. So this intercropping process was like a society. And the trade in the crops of agriculture led to formation of society. And we can follow this and verify it based on the age of the oldest crops known to man. Corn was cultivated in North America as early as 3600 BCE from New Mexico to Massachusetts. Foods Indigenous to the Western Hemisphere says this, and that's by Hugh Murphy. Earliest corn remnants of a cob found in the Teotihuacan Valley in Mexico date back to 7,000 years ago. Corn was developed from a single-eared wild grass found in America. Yucca, or domestic manioc, developed in the neotropics of America 10,000 years ago in the Brazilian savannas of Cerrado. And manioc was in the neotropics, a zoographical or phytogeographical region comprising Central and South America, including the tropical southern parts of Mexico and the Caribbean, as early as 7,000 years ago. So we understand that through corn and manioc, we can see that the staples of agricultural societies and tech, as we read about earlier, led to the formation of society in America as early as 10,000 years ago. So we'll go more into what that led to in our society as the development of spiritual systems based on these calendars and their viable knowledge as we go into the next chapter of Science, Symbols, Motifs, and Totems. But reflect on that. This viable knowledge led to the foundation of society through these crops, and this knowledge is in our bloodlines.